Okay, it's time for episode 4 of the Untitled Hockey Game DevLog. First off, let me preemptively apologize if you hear the heat going in the background. It's cold in my part of the world this time of year, and I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not. So, the first thing I did after I finished the last devlog was to remove that custom game button from the main menu, which removes the use of those drop-down menus that I implemented last episode. Now, you may be asking yourself, why would I do that? Well, it would solve part of my focus this month, which was to not add anything new, put aside anything unnecessary for now, and focus on things that are actually required to move the game towards a releasable state. One big part of that was making a schedule for the NIHL, as I call it, the AI League. Because at the end of the month, last month, the league existed, but it didn't do anything. So I used a simplified version of how I generate a schedule for the Players League. Figure out how many times each team should play each other team. In this case, we have 18 games per season. 4 teams in the league means that each team has 3 opponents, so 18 divided by 3 makes 6 games per opponent, and half should be at home, half should be away. So we make a schedule array that will hold one array for each game with just 2 numbers. Home is 0, away is 1. Where this is simplified is that I just set a global to alternate between 0 and 1 every day, and say, if it's a 0 day, pick a game at random from the big schedule, sim it, and then delete it from the array. There will be 36 total games, 18 times half the number of teams in the league, so that will take 72 days to work through the whole schedule, meaning that if we start on January 1st, the NIHL season would finish in the second week of March. Eventually, I'll probably come up with a hybrid between this system and the one I already use, because I like this system of making games as a pair that I can pick at random from a list. But right now, the code just assumes that there's only one game per day, so that will require a rewrite of the calendar logic, which I will have to do at some point because, as I recently learned, if you increase the league size to 6 instead of 4, there's so many games that they run all the way into June. But for now, that's not something I want to dive into yet. Another thing that I've been meaning to get working for a while was playoff stats. Your players' stats from playoff games were not tracked, so once the game was over, there was no way to see and to know who was performing in these important games or who was letting you down or whatever. So just to get it working, I use the game stats that are temporarily saved so that after the game you can see who did what. That means that it was just one array filled with zeros, and stats PO 0 was games played, 1 was goals, 2 was assists, etc., etc. This is where my whole plan for single-mindedly driving towards a releasable state kind of fell apart. You see, I now had 3 different ways of tracking stats. I had regular season stats, which was a struct, so that I could use dot accessors to find the stat that I wanted. And the league and the team were reals because they were the league and team's unique IDs. Then I had a separate past stats array, which was similar to the current stats, but the team was a string because it was just a made-up name of a team that doesn't really exist. And the league was also a string, but it was really the level of the league, like pro, amateur, or whatever, because when you were looking at free agents and deciding who to sign, you wanted to know how to judge their stats. And finally, I had the playoff stats, which was just an array of numbers, like I said, but then I had to put each of those inside a struct, because otherwise they had no connection to the player's UID, so I had no way of knowing who these stats belonged to if I didn't. Basically, what I'm trying to say is the stats were a mess. So I finally took it upon myself to put this all into something that makes sense. Now it's just one big array, and each entry is a struct with a year, then separated into regular and playoff. And league and level are now separate entries, which really just makes sense because the Players League and the NIHL, for example, are supposed to both be pro-level leagues, but obviously they're going to have different names. Connected to all that, I reworked the skater objects, which are the basis of every player in the game.
I had to rework these because some, but not all, of the old stats entries contained copies of the skater objects.
Previously, things like the league, team name, even the player's number were stored in this skater object. While reworking the stats, I realized that a lot of this stuff is totally unnecessary. Like, what if a player gets released by his team, or traded from one team to another and he gets a new number? So now the skater object just holds things that are intrinsic to the player, like his name, age, country, and so on. But that meant, say you clicked on a player in your lineup and you want to view the player details. The room has to know whether he's currently signed to a team or not, if so, which team, so it can draw the sweater, or the stats page wants to list only players in one league at a time. So between the stats rewrite and the skater object rewrite, I had to do some work on every room in the game, making sure that whatever room you were viewing had all the information it needed. Some needed more work than others, but every room nonetheless. So that took up a lot of my time this month, but now I've got the game back to where it was before this rewrite. And actually better, because now standings and stats are tracked for both leagues and you can view them at any time. Meanwhile, all the data behind the scenes is much easier to work with, which is a blessing for me. And I guess I learned a lesson. When implementing a new feature, it's okay, and probably even wise, to set it up as a separate thing. But once I've got it working correctly, I should think about where I want it to go permanently and incorporate it as soon as possible. Like team names, team colors, and even each team's available player numbers used to all be separate arrays before I combined them all into one team info. And there's already more I want to do here, like move players' moods from a separate array into their skater object. Something that will save me a little work is that I finally looked into importing CSVs and manipulating strings, which is something I used to know how to do in Python, but I never learned how to do in Gamemaker. This was actually something that I was inspired to investigate thanks to watching the Armchair Historian's dev streams. He and his team made the game Master of Command, which is a historical war game that obviously has a ton of values to tweak for cannon accuracy and upgrade costs and available units and all that stuff. So most of the time in his dev streams, he's not even working within Unity, he's just editing text and values and stuff in his like Google Docs spreadsheets. Then he can just rebuild the database from the spreadsheets and the changes are there in-game.
Absolute randomness, just pure chaos with the army generation, which can be fun. It also makes the bouncing a little easier, because look, the one on the right is the one I've been using. When I define a patrol army, all I have to write is do a division and do a random brigade. Done. So like in terms of balancing, I don't have much control, but because I don't have much control, it's not that hard. I would do that, and that. And these are now regular armies. True, true, true. False, false, false. Okay. And then that's the patrol done. Then we have... Okay, this should be better. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run this back. We're going to rebuild units because we changed the Grenzers. We're going to rebuild... Yeah, rebuild units, rebuild core data. And then rebuild campaign.
Anyways, for what I'm doing, it's actually pretty simple. You assign a variable to load CSV, and that creates a DS grid, which is like creating a table of your data. You then reference your data by XY coordinate. So in this example, if your names were already split into one column for last names and one column for first names, your DS grid width would be 2, and the DS grid height would be however many entries are in your table. Your column headers last and first would be at names 00 and names 10. My files, however, had the names in one column in last, first format, so I had a little more work to do. By assigning string split to a variable, you create an array containing multiple strings. In my case, we loop through the names column, assigning var name to the string split by comma space, Then name 0 would be the last name and name 1 is the first. That meant that I could load these 15,000 names I got from the 1921 Canadian census, split them all, and save the resulting strings to 2 different arrays. I could even include the country of birth column and let the code separate the names by country. Unfortunately, it's not going to be that easy. Whether these census results were digitized by volunteers or government employees or by OCR or what, I don't know, but there's plenty of typos, initials instead of full names, question marks. I've even seen some women's names, other bad entries. Sometimes they include a middle initial or a whole middle name, which is easy enough to fix with just another string split. But that's not even getting into names which don't seem to be real names. If I Google a name and nothing on the entire internet comes up, is that a bad entry, or is it just an unusual name from 100 years ago? So long story short, if I'm gonna have to go through the names and sanitize the list anyways, I might as well split them manually into 2 columns, cleaning up any bad entries, and have a separate CSV for every country. Then if I want to combine them into one giant names file later, I could do that pretty easily. One minor thing, I made some changes to the injuries event, so now when you roll a minor injury, there's a chance that your player is just sore and they'll be out 1 to 3 days, or they can strain something and be out up to 7. Then major injuries are sprained, fractured, or broken, and they can be injured up to 30 days depending. This is definitely lenient, but when the season is only 3 months long, losing a guy for a realistic amount of time would really suck. But anyways, then I made a list of a bunch of body parts that can get hurt, which leads to some funny stuff like your player going out with a sprained groin or a broken head or whatever. At some point, I'll make this system a little more complicated so the injuries make more sense and a broken neck and a broken toe aren't the same severity and all that. Once I've confirmed that I fixed everything that I broke with the big data rewrite, and I can sim multiple seasons without any major issues coming up, I think I'm going to go back to working on what you might call the character-driven stuff. You know, conversations with your owner and players, decisions about the future of the league, whatever. I've realized lately that I think that is the really important part of the game, and that's what's going to set it apart from other hockey sims that are just hockey games. So I really have to dive into those systems, which I had just the absolute basics of working at the end of last month. Okay, I think I'm going to call it there for this month. It feels cheesy to say, but please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. I'm going to get back to work, so I'll see you all next month.